Hello, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to the program. Thank you so much for watching Smart 24 TV. Of course, we do drive your business. Remember to catch all our shows on our GoTV channel at 394 and DSTV channel 372. We are the #1 business channel, bringing you the latest on business and policy that does affect business and the economy in Uganda. This is the point where we analyze policies and bring on board policymakers and activists and experts in different economic fields to get us moving on what's happening in the current spheres of work and get to, of course, answer the big questions. Now, of course, today in Uganda, domestic workers have become a thing actually to give attention. With over in the COVID-19 pandemic, over about 184,000 people lost their jobs, and many resorted to casual labor, and domestic work has been defined somewhat as casual labor and hasn't been given much attention. However, this year in July, a certain MP known as Miss Agnes Funihira, who is a workers MP in Parliament, tabled the Employment Amendment Bill 2022. Under this bill, they want to make provisions that, of course, haven't been available in the Employment Act of 2006. Some of these, of course, including workers' rights, especially the domestic workers, defining who a domestic worker is, and, of course, lifting the homestead or the home to a workplace, so long as there is a domestic worker in that home. Now, today we are discussing domestic work and more, and I am joined by none other than Miss Lydia Buite, who is a lawyer and an activist. She works with the Platform for Labor Action, and she's a programs officer at the NGO. You're most welcome, Miss Buite.
Thank you so much, and thank you for hosting us.
I'm very glad you're joining us. How was your Christmas, by the way, before we get into the big discussion here?
It was slow. It's normal. It was the normal day, I think.
Yes.
Normal day. I don't know. It's normal. Really normal.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And let's get to talk about, first of all, yourself. You working with the Platform for Labor Action. How has been your experience? What are some of the principles or the objectives of this non-government organization?
Okay, thank you. Platform for Labor Action is a non-government organization that advocates for the rights of vulnerable and marginalized workers in Uganda. It was founded in the year 2000 with the sole aim of really being the voice and speaking out and representing the very vulnerable workers in Uganda. And when you talk about those vulnerable workers, we mean workers like the low-income earners, workers in the informal sector, named the domestic workers, the market vendors, street vendors, plantation workers, casual workers, all those workers that we see on a day-to-day basis that perhaps we pay less attention to. When we also talk about low-income earners, we mean people who earn 600,000 Uganda shillings and below, because in Uganda's economy right now, if you earn 600,000, that is a hand-to-mouth. It's a hand-to-mouth earning that if you got any legal challenge, let's say with your employer, you are unable to afford legal representation, given how we know that legal representation in this country is very, very, very expensive. We also look out into children.
That's very interesting, because yes, just a few reports a few days back, they showed that from a labor survey that over 60% of Ugandans earn less than 200,000.
Yes.
So this is the community you're serving.
That's the community we are serving. And of course it's alarming, but and that's why the need for our services is really, really very, very high, because people really earn very little. And when they are faced with any legal challenge, they are unable to afford a lawyer of their own. So Platform for Labor Action, besides being an NGO, is also accredited to provide it is accredited by Uganda Law Council to provide legal aid services. So we are a legal aid service provider, which is really accredited. We have 3 legal clinics in Uganda, one based in Kampala, here in Ntinda, as you go to National Council of Higher Education, plot 14, Matters Lane, and then the other one is based in Uganda, which serves the eastern region, and then another one is based in Lira City, serving the Lamu sub-region. So, but the Kampala one has a national outlook that even workers who come from maybe Fort Portal, where they are able to be served. The reason why, because even when we look at the industrial court, we only have one. So most of the cases for labor, they come actually at the industrial court in Kampala. So that's how we are. So that is who we are. And my experience working with the organization has been very, very interesting. I think I've grown up at this institution. Once I got out of a school, I just joined the institution. I had the love for, working in social justice issues and being able to give back to community. It's sort of like become like a social enterprise of yourself. Like you're earning from it, but you get further satisfaction that whatever you're doing is actually supporting the very less vulnerable persons in the community. So for me, it is very interesting and very satisfying work that I do, yes.
Very interesting. Now, today talking about domestic work.
Yes.
Currently, we are going through very tough economic times. You agree with me? There's been the entire globe basically has been going through very hard financial times, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic hit in 2020. The whole globe is struggling economically. Now, when it comes to the developing countries like Uganda, it's even worse because we don't have very stable financial systems. So we are realizing that many of our workers are going into what we call the domestic work because first of all, that's what they can afford to do at the moment. And you've talked about people earning 600,000 as being the people that you cater for. That is almost 90% of Uganda, right? Basically, that is a lot of people that are getting involved in this work. Let's talk about the domestic work situation in Uganda. In your view and from your personal experience, do Ugandans or does the government of Uganda, has it embraced the domestic worker the way that he should be embraced? Have we taken care of the domestic worker in Uganda?
Oh, thank you. That's a very interesting question. Not only the government of Uganda, me and you, we are government.
Yeah, true.
We form the government.
So when you say government, we are falling on each other.
Yes. On each other. But generally, society embraced domestic work as work in Uganda. I think so that tells you how society perceives domestic work. But for us to know, is domestic work a form of employment? The answer is absolutely yes. It is a form of employment. And why do I say so? Article 40 of the Constitution of our Constitutional Republic of Uganda, 1995. In that article, everyone has a right to practice his or her profession, occupation, or business. Now, if I wake up and I say I'm going to do the work of being domestic work, which is not outlawed or prohibited by any law in Uganda, it means that domestic work that I'm doing is lawful occupation. So it is work because it has never been outlawed by any law that, you know what, this is not work. So is it a form of employment? Yes, it's a form of employment, and we start right from the Constitution. So anyone who joins this work is a worker, is a worker. And is a worker as covered in that Constitutional Republic of Uganda. And therefore, they're entitled to different rights that also accrue to them once they are being employed. Now, when we come in terms of how them, because people take domestic work as being like the last resort. Like for someone to go and do domestic work is like you're a failure in life. We have not reached a point, and yet people leave this country to go to other country, and they actually do domestic work. And they build mansions out of it. They educate people out of it. And they're also men and women who are working as domestic workers in this country, that it is this occupation that has fed them for years. It has educated their children. They have paid medical bills for their relatives. They have done everything using remuneration or salary that has been got from this occupation of domestic work. We saw when COVID-19 came, like you stated, people lost employment. And you would find cooks, qualified cooks, chefs, dropping out and doing domestic work. And they were earning money from it, being paid 350, being paid 400 in homesteads. And why not? It is work at the end of the day. So the societal biases around the occupation of domestic work is what makes it look like as if, but also there's something on it. You know, because when we talk about domestic work, we look at the work which is done by this person, isn't it? It's done in a home setting. And in most cases, it's done by women. So because it's done by women, society has defined the roles of women in our society. And those roles, because they are engendered and they're defined and said that is work of a woman, it is less valued, it is undervalued because it's supposed to be done by a woman. That's why you find that in a home, in most cases, you hear statements like, as a man saying, I don't get involved myself in issues of domestic workers. That domestic worker is here helping the woman. No, is an employee of the of the household. Is not helping only the woman. When that person irons clothes or shirts, is not only helping me, is helping both of us to balance between work and family life. You understand? But we normally we feminize. The feminization of domestic work brings it to the societal bias of undervaluing it. But also, just to tell us, our dear viewers, is that this domestic work sector in itself, it has businesses as well. We have recruiters who recruit these domestic workers. And for example, whether they are informal recruiters or formal recruiters, they charge a fee. So they're meaning in this sector, there are people who are actually earning from it and operating businesses, however small they may be. Yeah. So there are businesses that were within this sector. So this is actually work. But just as I finish, whether this is a form of work or employment, at the international level, the issue of domestic work has actually generated a lot of debates. And because of that, we even saw in 2011, the International Labour Organization conference, where Uganda is a member of the ILO. As a member of the ILO, they adopted an ILO convention, an international convention. A convention is like an international law, right? An international instrument on domestic work, which is entitled Decent Work for Domestic Workers. Why? Having realized that society discriminates against this occupation, and yet it is the basis of, or it is the engine of production. Do you know I wouldn't be here if I did not have a domestic work at home?
Yeah, true.
Maybe perhaps our presidents would not be ready in time if they did not have domestic workers working for them. Our members of parliament would not be able to come and legislate and undertake policy decisions if no one is there. Yeah. So you can imagine that actually the domestic work is the engine of the economy for anyone even to participate in productivity. So yes, it is a form of employment.
Yeah. Oh,
yes.
Very interesting. And I love the fact that you bring it out that it has been, put to gender. Like it's a feminine thing. Yeah. No man can do it. And that has changed, by the way, recently, with very, very many men actually getting to participate in domestic work.
Very true. We're seeing also the trend of men increasing to take up this work.
Yeah.
And what is more interesting is that when you find a household which has two, the male and the male domestic worker and a female domestic worker, what is interesting is that as we're going to see challenges that the male domestic worker will be paid more.
Yes.
And in most cases, they may not even be called domestic workers. They'll be given some other name.
Some other cool name. Now, let's talk about still the scope of a domestic worker before we go into a break.
Yeah.
The confusion that when people saw this bill, I personally got to see some reactions on social media. Some people were saying, have we defined a domestic worker? To what extent have we defined a domestic worker? Because in the Constitution, they do define a casual worker or casual employee in the Act. But the domestic work is not defined therein, if I'm informed sufficiently. So in your own perspective, as Shamba boys, basically people who work in the gardens, people who mow the lawn, people who do the dressing, there are other household work that is being done. Are they also domestic workers? To what extent do you define them?
Yes. And I will use the international definition, which was adopted in that ILO Convention number 189 on decent work for domestic workers, because then at the international level it becomes like a standard of some sort. A domestic worker is defined as a person who does the work or who works within and around the household, either as a live-in or a live-out, or on a permanent basis or temporary basis. That is a domestic worker. So meaning, the shamba boy is a domestic worker. A security guard who is not under a security company, who, people have private, like they go in the village and they get they call them getmen or getman.
Yes.
That person is actually a domestic worker, because they are working within and around the household, and they are either permanent, they are not casual, or they are also temporary. There are those who just come and wash, go, and wash and go. They are either live in or live out. Live in means that this domestic worker, while doing their work, they stay and reside with the employer. Live out means that this domestic worker, they come and work and go. They don't sleep over. They just come and work and go. And when we say temporary, it means that I maybe in a week, I come and I wash your clothes maybe 3 times and I go. Okay? So after every 3 days or 4 days, I come and I do work and I go. So we have those kind of workers, and all those defined as domestic workers. Yes.
Thank you so much, Ms. Buita. We're going to take a very short break. Ladies and gentlemen, when we return, we want to talk about the amendment that is currently on the floor of Parliament. And under this amendment, they are, of course, trying to operationalize some of the provisions that are provided in Article 40 that we've been talking about here. And some of the things that have been brought on board are the fact that we need the NSSF fund to be part of the package that the domestic worker walks away with. Breastfeeding mothers need to take leave as well. But also the wages of these domestic workers also must be looked at critically. But however, remember, today in Uganda's laws, we do not have a minimum wage. And that minimum wage bill has been lagging for quite some time. So how is all this going to be enforced in a space where the domestic workers still earn a very meager pay, and in the middle, other policies that haven't been looked into? You're watching Smart 24 TV, and I am Anthony. We're talking domestic work. Don't go anywhere. Stay with us.
Smart 24